Yvette Cooper, thanks for joining us on TalkTV. The question many are asking is, with the government moving on knife crime, it's introduced new legislation today, why is that not enough? What would you do that's further and faster?
I think the Conservative government is going nowhere near far enough. Obviously, there have been long delays. I think we've had about 17 different announcements they were going to ban zombie knives. They're still on the streets, but they also need to go much further. This ban doesn't include sort of ninja swords, the kind of real dangerous weapons that have been used in really terrible, fatal stabbings. And also, I don't think they're doing enough to tackle some of the online illegal sales where we think there should be stronger criminal penalties as well.
In terms of that, isn't it just the case that the people who are selling these knives and actually making these knives, don't they just innovate to get beyond the law? Is there any way to really catch up with them?
That is a risk, and that's why you have to both move fast and you have to be much broader in the scope of this ban, because otherwise, if you just have a little measurement here or a change there, then they'll just adapt what it is they're making and selling and making profits from. And that's why we need a much broader ban to take these dangerous weapons off the street. But also we want to do a full review of what's happening in terms of age identification, some of those checks, which again are just not happening. It's making it far too easy for young people to get hold of dangerous weapons and to have them on the streets. We've got to get them off the streets.
We're in Milton Keynes today and you're doing a sort of 3-day blitz talking about this. What have you learned in Milton Keynes today?
Well, we've been talking to local police officers, to the Chief Constable, to local community organisations here. They've done a lot of work here, and I came here some time ago because they were having real problems with knife crime. They've done a lot of work here to try and tackle that and to work together. And so we were hearing about the things that they found that made a difference are the things we're calling for nationally. Really early, fast intervention, making sure that you've got the youth workers that are ready to step in A&E units, they can move fast, or in custody suites, to be able to get straight on with the action that is needed to get young people back on track, to prevent them reoffending. We've got to have much stronger action so you don't have young people just falling through the net, and a major new prevention programme, the Young Futures programme, that we want to roll out right across the country.
How are you going to pay for all this? We hear about Labour saying about non-DOMs, we hear about private school taxes and so on. Are you not just going to have to raise taxes to... It's a very ambitious policy you're putting forward.
So there's two things. First of all, there's the youth prevention partnerships that we want to happen in all areas. That is about getting people to work together, organisations that ought to be working in partnership that too often aren't. That's existing organisations. So we make sure that every penny of public money is well spent and is targeting this knife crime that's gone up by 77% in the last 8 years.
That is a shocking...
second thing...
Sorry.
Yes, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The second thing is to set up community hubs. And we would fund about 100 new community hubs across the country. That will come from £100 million. That is part of the additional VAT that we'll raise on private schools. Now, the majority of the money that we would raise will go into schools, additional teachers and mental health workers. But a portion of it, we've said, will be providing these community hubs to provide both mental health support and access additional youth workers and mental health workers, and also do this crucial crime prevention work as well.
You mentioned that shocking statistic that knife crime is up 77%. That's the really big stuff that affects people. Literally, lives are being taken. On a lower level crime, but one that annoys so many of our viewers and listeners at TalkTV, is shoplifting. It's up 32%. I just wonder, you've said you'll crack down on that as well, but are you going to prosecute everything? If someone steals a Mars bar, are you going to prosecute them?
The focus has got to be on the repeat offending and the repeat shoplifting, and we know that a lot of it's being driven by organised crime. Ultimately, the police and the CPS have to make those decisions, but the area that we have been clear that there is a real problem, because you're right, 32%, that is a massive increase. The reason it's happening is because organised crime and shoplifters think they can just get away with it, because they think there's going to be no action, because too often there is. Things that we need is neighbourhood police patrols, in our town centres, neighbourhood police patrols have been cut right across the country. There's still 10,000 fewer neighbourhood police on our streets than there were 10 years ago. And that means actually you've not got that presence in the town centre. And then what we need to do is to have more action tackling shoplifting and also violence against shop workers as well. So you get those local neighbourhood police can then work in partnership with the shops and to get rid of this thing where there's a £200 rule.
Yes.
And very often you'll have the same repeat offenders are going into shop after shop
with respect,
and doing less than £200 in each shop,
yes,
and nothing's being done.
As a policy.
Yeah.
But Yvette Cooper, you're not saying that people who shoplift once should definitely be prosecuted, or maybe you are saying that.
No, well, that's going to be a matter for local police and CPS.
What's your thought on that?
No, I think that's for them to do, because obviously there is a difference when you have first-time offenders to when you have the repeat offenders. So our focus is on repeat offending, and it's also different when you're talking about young people and adults and so on. Our focus is around the repeat offenders. That's the problem that shop workers will say that they are facing, that it'll be the same faces that will come back in again. They know it's linked to organised crime because that's what's driven this big increase. And the really troubling thing is it often will be linked to violence against shop workers as well. And that's why we want stronger laws around violence against shop workers.
I want to ask you about immigration, and there are a lot of TalkTV viewers and listeners who don't feel they know what your policy is. One thing you always talk about is cracking down on the criminal gangs. But Rishi Sunak at his press conference last Thursday said that under existing legislation, which I think you voted against, 837 members of criminal gangs have actually been put behind bars. Why is that not enough? Why is the existing legislation not work?
So they've actually had a 30% drop in convictions of people smugglers under the Conservatives. That's not good enough. So you go back to the last Labour government and the convictions on people smugglers were higher. Even though we've had this real increase in these dangerous boat crossings that are undermining our border security and are putting lives at risk, there's still this 30% drop in convictions.
Is it possible to
stop? That's why I think that's they'll talk, but what we actually need is the action. What we need is the convictions, and we need a proper plan to go after the criminal smuggler gangs. Is it possible to stop
the boats? Yes or no? Is it possible to stop the boats in your belief?
Well, I think that's what everybody should be trying to do.
But is it possible?
We didn't have this problem, did we? If you go back 10 years, if you go back 8 years, even if you go back 5 years, we weren't seeing these dangerous boat crossings.
So tell our viewers and listeners, Yvette Cooper, what is Labour going to do to stop the boats?
So, first thing we would do is strengthen our border security with a new crackdown on the criminal gangs. And there's 3 parts to that. Additional police, a new cross-border police unit with substantial additional police officers to work with other European countries, to work with Europol and so on, to go after the gangs and their supply chains, because you need to stop the boats before they get to the French coast in the first place by going after those supply chains. Secondly, stronger powers to go after smugglers and to go after smuggler gangs here in the UK. And then the third thing is new agreements, a new security agreement with other European countries on fast sharing of information. We don't get the proper information on who is suspected of being part of these smuggler gangs. That's not shared with the UK. We should be sharing that information so you can go after those gangs much faster and actually deal with the fact that they are making huge profits and getting away with it at the moment.
We've talked about illegal immigration, and that is a real worry for people, but sometimes the legal migration is too. Certainly there are people from the UK who were born in the UK who are going on marches, for example, in support of the Palestinian cause. There are some people who are chanting anti-Semitic abuse, who are expressing their support for Hamas, for Houthi rebels, possibly for Hizb ut-Tahrir as well. We've looked, the Metropolitan Police in London has said that 30,000 police officer shifts have been used policing those protests. Should they continue to go ahead? I mean, we're talking about £28.5 million of taxpayers' money to police them. What would you do as Home Secretary?
So we've got a long-standing right to protest, right for freedom of speech in our country, and that is something that, you know, goes back really many generations and is important. And that will include all kinds of marches or debates and things that people disagree with and will have strongly held views. What you cannot do, though, is allow anti-Semitism in any way. It has no place on Britain's streets. Extremism, hateful extremism, we do need much stronger action to tackle that. I support the police in taking action against anti-Semitism, which has risen. We've also seen increases in Islamophobia as well. One of the things that I've called on the Home Office to do is to strengthen some of the requirements around the reporting, because they've weakened some of the measures around tackling anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and other hateful extremist crimes. I think that needs to be strengthened. We think we need more action there, because it's just so corrosive, it's so damaging, it goes against British values. It's just the wrong thing to do.
Final question, just briefly if you would. You're one of the few Labour frontbench politicians who has experience of government. You've been a Secretary of State. The high likelihood is you will be the next Home Secretary of this country unless there's a reshuffle in between now and the election. What's the first thing you're going to do? So
many things to start with. Is we want to get this focus on tackling knife crime to start early and to make a difference around knife crime. We want to get neighbourhood police back on the streets, and we want this action against the dangerous criminal gangs that are organising the boat crossings that are undermining our border security. So I would say the tackling knife crime and serious violence, the neighbourhood police back on the streets, and then also our border security as well.
Yvette Cooper, thank you for talking to TalkTV.
Thank you.